Now let's talk about animation, understanding the principles of animation and how to actually execute on this in Blender. Now no matter the concept you have in mind, no matter what you're trying to create, you are going to have some form of animation. And animation doesn't always mean character animation. To the general public, when they hear animation, they think of cartoons, they think of 3D animation of characters. But animation itself is basically changing the location, the rotation, and the scale of objects. So it could be products, it could be random shapes, it could be characters, but since we are trying to create product VFX videos, we are mostly going to be animating products. So let's just continue from where we stopped and explore the concepts of animation, explore what keyframes are, interpolation, and all these things. So let's get to it. So this is where we stopped in the last lesson. Now let's go to our solid view. Now we have this sphere and we have this cube. Let's click on the sphere, right click and shade smooth so it looks nicer. Now let's drag this timeline up. Make sure you can see this double-sided arrow and drag it up so you can see our timeline. Now to create an animation, which is basically to create movement, you need something called keyframes. And then a keyframe is you basically telling the software to remember the exact location or the rotation or the scale of an object at that point. So for example, you have a 10 seconds animation and at the beginning, your object was here and it was rotated like this. So you tell Blender, remember this object, remember where it is at the beginning and remember how it's rotated. Then you want an animation where you move the object to this side and it rotates. So it starts like this and then it goes and ends like this. Now you have to tell Blender to remember how it is here and then you do that by adding a keyframe. Then at the end you add another keyframe where you want the object to end up. So the new location and the new rotation. Then you add another keyframe. So when you play the video from the beginning to the end, your video will go basically like this. So this is the original location, this is the end of the location, this is the original rotation, this is the end of the rotation. So this is how it's going to play. Let's quickly practicalize that. Hit N on your keyboard so you can see all of this. Now let's go to our front view. Hit 1 to go to front view. Now let's say we want to take this cube from the bottom to somewhere up here and you want it to move up. So make sure this playhead is at frame 1. So bring your mouse over to the location and hit I. So as you can see here, you can see this diamond looking thing here. That means a new keyframe has been added. So let's go to, if 24 frames makes 1 second, 2 seconds will be 48 frames. So let's go to 48 frames, frame 48. And then let's move this cube up. So G, Z, and move it up at frame 48. Then let's come here and hit I again. Then when we go back to 1 and press spacebar to play, you see our cube is going up. Yeah. Okay, let's set the end frame to 48. So you can see it's showing starts 1 and end 250. That means if I play it, it's going to play past 48 and go all the way to 250, but we don't need all that right now. Let's change it to 48. So we have a very short timeline. So it's a very quick, repetitive timeline. So you see, we already added a keyframe for the location. So this keyframe tells Blender, remember where I am. Remember my position at frame 1. And at the end, at frame 48, it tells Blender, remember my position at frame 48. So when I play from 1 to 48, it basically translates you across to the next point. So let's do the same for rotation. Let's say it starts like this, very normal. Make sure you hit I over rotation to create a keyframe on rotation. If you don't do that in the beginning and you just change things, it has not registered its original position. So after registering the original position at frame 1, let's go to the end frame 48 and just mess with these values. Just rotate things around till it's just rotated weirdly, something like this. Then hit I again. Now when we play this back, you can see how nice it looks. Now you're not only changing the location, you're also changing the rotation. So it's starting from this balanced look and it's now flowing upwards. Yeah, as I'm moving my mouse from left to right on the timeline, you can see only the Z location is changing because our cube is moving upward. It's not moving to the left, it's not moving to the right. Only the Z location is changing. But for the rotation, everything is changing because, you know, I messed with all the rotations. So if only the Z has an animation on it, we can clear the keyframes on this too. So right click and clear single keyframe, clear single keyframe. So we have a keyframe on only the Z. This color here shows that there is a keyframe on that particular attribute. So you're seeing it's just going up. Now there's something called interpolation, and the default interpolation in Blender is Bezier. This sounds like crazy random words, but basically what interpolation means is how slow and fast your animation happens. So is it happening at a constant speed, just going from here to here? Or is it happening fast then becoming slow? Or is it happening slow then becoming fast? Now the default setting is going to start slow, it's going to get fast, and it's going to end slow. That is how it looks. It's like a curve of you starting slow, then going fast, then you coming slow. As you can see how much time it took to leave the ground. And you can see that it slowed down before it stopped. So it didn't just stop abruptly, it slowed down. So we can change the interpolation from Bezier to linear. So if we hit T on our timeline, we would see interpolation here. So we have constant, linear, and Bezier. I don't think you use constant except you are blocking out character animation. Let's change it to linear. Now you will see the difference. Now the difference is with linear, it is a very straightforward animation. It's not slowing down or speeding up anywhere. To illustrate this effect in like a graph, let's drag this up, come here to this drop down and select graph editor, or use Shift F6. You can either select it here or just make sure your mouse is over the timeline and hit Shift F6. Now you can see this is the graph that shows you all the animation you are doing. To make it simple, let's go back to frame 1, right click on the rotation and clear keyframes. So we have only the Z location keyframe, so it's only moving up and down. Okay, it's only moving up. So now that we have this, let's hit A to select all. A selects all. So, and the same thing that works here with A selecting all, G moving, also works in your graph editor. So if you can see things the way I'm seeing it, hit A on the keyboard and hit full stop. Remember, that is why we set our frame select to full stop. The same way, if I hit full stop here, it just takes me exactly to where that particular object is. If I wanted to focus on the light, full stop, focus on the light, the cube, full stop. So the same thing here, if I want to focus on this specific keyframe, I'll hit full stop and it just takes me there. And some people get lost when they are in this view, like what's happening. All you need to do is just hit A and full stop. So it takes you back to the wide view. Now you have this. This is basically a graph that shows you the flow of the keyframes. Remember when we were looking at the timeline, when we were looking at our keyframes, we are seeing only one diamond here to show us the individual points. Now if we are looking in the graph editor, we can see an actual graph of how the location is going from here up to here. So if you go and hit T again and change it to linear, you can see we now have a very straight graph. Let me drag this up. It's just a straightforward graph. You can see it. It's not slowing down, it's not speeding up, it's just going up and stopping. Just going up to the end. But if I hit T and set it to Bezier, you can see it slows down in the end. It slows down. So it starts slow and speeds up and slows down. That is why you have this S curve here. So for each keyframe in your graph editor, you have handles. So with this handle, you can adjust the graph. So you can make it bend, and you can see it's affecting the actual animation. You could drag this one too. And you could also click on a keyframe and scale it. You could also rotate it. You could also move it. That's the thing with Blender. Your G, R, and S is what you use most of the time when you're messing with stuff. So let's say we want our cube to slow down even more. Let's click on this handle here, then G, X to move it down this way. Then let's say we want it to start very fast. So we don't want it to start slow. We want it to just start super fast and then slow down. Let's click on this bottom handle for this keyframe, this one here. Then let's bring it up. So you can see the graph looks different. It's no longer an S. It's no longer the typical S that is just a very smooth, slow to fast to slow. It now looks more like a, what would you call this? A C. or an R, like a small letter R. Yeah. So this is the first keyframe, this is the second keyframe. Now this means it's going up really fast, then it takes time to slow down. Let's play it and see what it looks like. Yeah. So you can see it's starting really fast, then it's slowing down. So pooh. So this kind of interpolation is used in a lot of scenarios, in a lot of product animation. This just looks very cool when you're messing with products in animation to get this speed ramp effect. So that's basically what interpolation means. So remember, keyframe 1, keyframe 2, these are the handles for keyframe 2, and these are the handles for keyframe 1. So if I bring this back here to where it was, and I bring this one down to where it was, it goes back to normal. You can see it now starting slow and ending slow. So if I want it to start slow and end fast, I'm explaining interpolation at this point, the speed at which your objects move. If I want it to start slow, we'll do the opposite of what we did before. So for your beginning keyframe, you click on this handle, GX. You don't need to use GX, you can just drag it with your hands anyway. GX just makes it accurate on the x-axis. So you can just drag it here. So you see the way it was before? In just frame 20 is already going high, but when we drag it forward, it's going to take time before it goes high. So let's do the same thing for this one. We are doing the opposite of what we first did. Let's drag this one down. So remember the graph before was looking like an R, like this, but now it's the opposite. Now it's starting slow and ending abruptly. So let's see what that looks like. See? Now it's like dragging, trying to start very slow, then it's ending very fast. So these are principles you can use in a lot of ways, in a lot of scenarios. So let's just set up a quick scene just as an example. Remember the Samsung phone model we downloaded in the last couple lessons? So I hope you are saving your projects. I hope you are saving the projects from these files. So let's go back to the other scene, the scene we created for our basic scene. Go back to our camera view. Now let's work with this scene instead of creating a whole new scene. Let's go to our material view. Now we don't want to have this as just a still image. You want things to move around and want it to happen in 2 seconds. So let's go to the end frame here and set it to 48. So it's a 2 seconds long animation. Now if I hit play, nothing much is happening here because there is no animation. Now let's add a bit of animation. So let's start with the phones. So we want to, at frame 1 is how everything starts. So at frame 1, let's bring this phone down here. Let's also bring this one down. Almost touching the floor. Yeah. Now let's add a keyframe. So if you can see, hit N and go to item. So we can see this. At frame 1, if you want to add a specific keyframe, we can just come to location, Z, and instead of hitting I to insert keyframe, click insert single keyframe. So it only adds for just this guy. Do the same thing to this guy, right click, insert single keyframe. If you can see your keyframe here, this is something that would really confuse you as a beginner. As you can see, we can't see any keyframe here, even though we have added keyframe. Just click your middle mouse button and drag down on your timeline. Yeah, you can see the keyframe has appeared. Now let's go to the end. The end is frame 48. Now at frame 48, let's bring this one up around here. Also bring this one up around here. Then right click on the Z again and insert single keyframe. And add a single keyframe. So when I hit play, you can see both of them just rise up. Now let's also affect the rotation. So at the beginning for this first one, let's hit I to add a keyframe for all the rotation axes. And at the end, let's hit RR to rotate the phone. You know, we talked about RX to rotate on the X, RY to rotate on the Y, and RZ. So when you hit RR, it basically just follows where your mouse is going. As you can see, I'm drawing a circle and the phone is also drawing a circle. So it's basically just following your mouse. So if we hit RR and we mess with this thing a bit, and then we left click, would have changed the position, of the rotation, of the object. So let's hit I here to create the keyframe, to tell Blender, hey, at the end, this is what we want it to look like. And at the beginning, this is what we want it to look like. So let's do it for this guy too. At the beginning, hit I, to add a new rotation. Then at the end, RR to rotate it, something like this. Then hit I to register that animation. Now, when we hit play, you can see what's happening. Yeah, our phones are rotating. Let's bring this guy closer to this side. Yeah, we already have an animation going on here. Now we can also animate, we can animate anything. We can animate the light, we can animate a lot of parameters. Any of these objects can be animated. We can even animate the camera. So let's try animating the camera. So at frame 1, go to frame 1. Let's add a Y location. Let's drag this back and forth. Yeah, this is what we need. We don't want it to go left and right. We don't want it to go up and down. We want it to go back and forth. So on the location Y, right click and hit insert single keyframe. And at the end, let's drag it forward until we are closer. Right click, insert single keyframe. So let's play it. We're already creating a cool animation. The camera is pushing forward while the phones are flying up. We're already creating something cool. So you can animate any of these properties. You can make things bigger or smaller. You can animate this monkey at the back. At the first frame, we can hit I on the scale. And at the last frame, we can S to scale it up so it's bigger. Then hit I again. And let's do the opposite for the second monkey. In the beginning, hit I over scale. And at the end, at frame 48, let's scale it down. You can also scale it down here by dragging down and scaling to the left. And hit I. So when we play it, this monkey should get bigger, this one should get smaller. Yeah. So things are just happening. Movement is happening. You're now creating movement in your scene. So let's go to, yeah, you can see it looks really nice. Things are now actually moving. Now you can take this as an assignment and just play with it. Move different things in the scene. You could change the rotation of this tube here. You could move the cylinder up and down. You could basically mess with different things. So when you add a keyframe at one spot and add another keyframe at another spot, then you play, it's going to translate from that spot to the next spot. That is the gist of animation. So let's do the interpolation thing we talked about earlier. So right here, let's hit Shift F6 to go into the graph editor. Now, in the graph editor, when we hit this drop down, you can see object transform. When we hit the drop down, you see all the elements or all the properties that have animation on them. So you can see the Z location has animation because we are going up on the Z. Just the same thing you have here. It's like there is a copy of it here. X, Y, Z rotation. Now, let's click on the eyeball for all the rotation so we can see only the Z location. Hit A and full stop so we can see the entire graph. So the same thing we did here where we made things move from fast to slow. Let's do the same thing here. And you can easily just do that by clicking on this handle. You know, this is one keyframe, this is another keyframe, remember? Click on this handle, hit G on the keyboard so you can move it around. Then just drag it somewhere here. So you have this R looking sign. I don't know why I'm calling it an R. Just curve. So now it's going to start fast. Now you can see the difference between this phone and this phone. Let me hit play. So you can see this one starts slowly and just gradually goes to the top, while this one just pops up. Just, yeah. This just looks cooler the way it bounces off. But then it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you want this slow look, that's fine. If you want things to just pop out, that's fine. So for this second phone, let's do the same thing. Just select only the Z location, turn the rest off, then bring this one up. Now they'll both move at the same pace, yeah. So just make it yours, just animate different things over here. For example, we could rotate this RR to just rotate it weirdly, add the rotation animation in the end, rotate it again in a weird way, add the rotation animation. And you can see things are already just going crazy. Like animation is fun, yeah? If you just take your time to take each and every one of these elements and then add different things to it, it's going to look really, really cool. Like this ball, for example, we could make it roll. We could make this box flip. We could do a lot of different things. So these are basically the basics when it comes to animation. These are the basics of what a keyframe is, how to animate on the XYZ, location, rotation and scale axis, and interpolation. Those are the basic skills you need to create whatever you want to create. So now I think we have covered a lot of the basics, texturing, a lot of the animation basics. So in our next lesson, we are going to actually create a project, a full VFX project. So yeah, guess I'm excited about that. I hope you're excited about it too.